You are listening to the Overthinker's Guide to Joy, episode 34. This week, I'm going to talk all about anxiety and addiction. Let's dive in. This is a podcast for overthinkers, overdoers, and overachievers who are tired of feeling over-anxious and just want to feel better. I'm your host, certified life coach, Jackie DeGrenis. Hey there, and welcome back. So a few weeks ago, I was talking about habits. And as many of you know, the cornerstone of my work is all about developing good daily habits and learning to let go of the habits that are holding you back. What I didn't talk about in the earlier episodes is addiction. While I'm not an addiction expert, I'm always eager to learn more about the world of it. We tend to think of addiction or addicts as people with potentially dangerous habits. Usually we associate addiction with drugs or alcohol, smoking, or sometimes gambling. But these are just the ones that get a lot of attention. Addiction comes in all shapes and sizes. And the truth is, most of us are addicted to something. People often joke about being addicted to sugar or caffeine, but since these things are socially acceptable, we don't pay quite as much attention to them. But they're just as serious of an addiction as anything else. Because addiction can really mean anything that we feel we can't control, or it has more control over us. Now, many years ago, I knew a woman who was a shopping addict. And she said that she would shop when she was having a good day. She would shop when she was having a bad day. She would shop when she was bored. She said the immediate high of purchasing something was the best part. Sometimes wearing something for the first time or, carrying a new handbag and getting a compliment would keep the high going a little longer. But for the most part, it was actually all about the shopping, not even the having. She talked about leaving things in her closet that she never removed the tags from. She would sometimes buy things in duplicate. She just didn't even know what she had. And most of the time, she was racked with guilt and shame. When her credit card came, she'd be devastated. And not only could she not afford her habit, she knew that it was a disease. She actually joined Shopaholics Anonymous, not that different than AA. But she said her group was not particularly helpful because where they met was in an office building right across the street from Neiman Marcus in Beverly Hills, which was her favorite store. And all she could do was focus on the Neiman Marcus sign the entire time they would have a meeting. She compared it to going to an AA meeting in a coffee shop across from your favorite bar. So she ended up finding another Shopaholics Anonymous meeting center, and she was quite successful. But the point was, I didn't even know at that time, this was like in the early 80s, I didn't even know that at that time that was a potential addiction. But once again, it just doesn't get maybe necessarily the same amount of airtime as some of the more common addictions. So yes, sugar, caffeine, food, shopping, they're all equally difficult addictions to break. But the new research indicates that one of the greatest new addictions is actually in the palm of our hands. And that's our smartphones. And obviously, it's not just the phone itself, but all of the apps and technology available inside our little devices. And it wasn't that long ago that it was a big deal to get a letter in the mail or a phone call from a friend or loved one. I remember being a teenager and I just loved the phone. My girlfriends and I would spend hours talking on the phone. It was the 70s, and it's just what we did. If you couldn't get to somebody's house to hang out, you sat on the phone for hours and just talked about stuff. And then in the early 80s, pagers and beepers were the big things. What started out as a life-saving tool for doctors on call then became a communication device for friends and family. And then, of course, that gave way to the answering machine. And for those of you old enough to remember racing home from work to see if the red light was blinking on the machine in hopes that somebody important or interesting would leave us a message. And then came the cell phone. And then the ability to leave messages on the phone itself. And then came smartphones. And that's when addictive behavior went into overdrive. Letter writing, of course, became emails. Texting was a more sophisticated form of a pager system. Social media with Facebook likes, Instagram hearts, Snapchat messages, Twitter retweets, gaming, shopping, and algorithms that know your every keystroke. Google searches, shopping histories, sales you might like, things you need, things you want, things you didn't even know existed, and now you can't live without them. Sometimes you'll want something so badly that pops up in your feed, you're willing to, click on Amazon at a long red light just so you can have it for next day delivery. And yes, any one of these things can become or already is an addiction. So the question is, are we all addicted to our phones because of the apps and the conditioning of the sound of a ping or a badge icon indicating that you have new information ready for you? Well, maybe. Maybe that's part of it. I mean, there are engineers who work very, very hard to make sure that the sounds and the colors and the lights and the scrolls and the algorithms all feed into you wanting more, whether that's, again, shopping, social media, gaming, gambling, whatever. But I think the difference between what is maybe something that's fun versus an addiction or a bad habit versus an addiction is that an addiction, the distinction would be you need it to pacify a feeling in your body, like it's a calling. And one of the biggest problems with all addictions is that it's probably rooted in something else. We tried something at one time for the first time because of a circumstance, whether it was the first time you had a first bite of birthday cake and there's a happy memory being associated with going to birthday parties, or maybe it was your first sip of alcohol at a wedding, or to buy something that you didn't really need, but it felt celebratory and fun and you just wanted it. And so those happy memories, those triggers of trying something for the first time are fine. The only problem is if it becomes an addiction, right? So that first sip of alcohol turns into, I need to have a whole glass. A whole glass is, I need to have a whole bottle, or I need to have it every day, or I need to eat cake every day, or I need to buy something every day. When it becomes a ritual or a pacification, that's when it's a problem. So, like I said, any one of these habits are fine in moderation or with mindfulness. But it's when we mindlessly do something or knowingly do something that we know has negative consequences. And yet, we keep doing it. So Dr. Judd Brewer is a psychiatrist who not only has a medical degree, but also a PhD and studies stress and anxiety. And he wrote the New York Times bestseller, Unwinding Anxiety, where he talks about his extensive research on the subject of addiction. And I'll link up the book in the show notes. It's a phenomenal book. If you've ever had any curiosity about your own addictions or your own anxiety, it's just a phenomenal explanation of why our brains do what they do. But I'm going to try and summarize it a little bit in this podcast. He talks about addiction being something we use as a coping mechanism to avoid other unpleasant feelings, whether that's boredom, loneliness, nervousness, anxiety, stress, insecurity, whatever. And anxiety, although an unpleasant feeling, is something that is an addiction that is on the rise as well. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Many of us wear our stress or anxiety as a badge of honor. And at some point in our lives, it probably drove us. It made us purposeful. And it may have made you even successful. I know that I often wore my anxiety as a badge of honor, and I do believe that it was partly why I was successful. But as one of my clients and former colleagues coined the phrase, my anxiety is no longer a winning strategy. Dr. Brewer offers a 3-step approach to breaking this cycle of addiction, whether it be anxiety or something else. He says the first step, or gear, as he calls them, is awareness. Asking yourself these questions before you indulge in your go-to habit, your go-to addiction. 1, why am I doing this? What triggered this behavior? What reward am I getting? And 4, do I want to keep doing this? Now, in the case of smoking, which is an example he uses quite frequently, you may have started smoking when you were a teenager to rebel against your parents, to look cool, to fit in with your friends. It gave you a reward. But those reasons may no longer serve you. Now you may still smoke just out of habit, when you're stressed, when you're bored, when you're anxious, when you want to avoid something. This is the awareness part. This is the first gear. Now here's part 2, or second gear. Pay attention to the results now. Using again the smoking analogy. It's expensive, it's inconvenient, it can cause cancer, emphysema, it's annoying to others, it tastes bad, it smells bad. So the reasons for initially doing it probably don't exist anymore. Does it still help you fit in? Does it still make you feel cool? Do you still feel like you need to rebel against your parents? And then what's the feeling in your body that triggers the need to smoke? Is it boredom, irritation, distraction? What can you learn from those feelings? In the book, Brewer talks about overcoming addiction not being about willpower. Willpower is kind of an old-fashioned philosophy. If you just had enough willpower, you could avoid your addiction or you could break your addiction. He doesn't believe this anymore. He thinks that it's about retraining your brain to access the right memory. The one that reminds you that the dopamine hit that you once got from that activity or substance is no longer worth the longer-term feeling of discomfort or guilt or disease. So the second gear, to reiterate, is about asking the question, what can I learn from this? Being truly curious about the consequences just beyond the immediate gratification phase. And finally, there's third gear. And third gear is what Brewer refers to as the BBO, finding a bigger, better offer. You need to find another reward that is more rewarding than the previous one. Again, using the smoking analogy, but one of the reasons people tend to gain weight when they quit smoking is that they substitute eating for smoking. Now, if you were to have a piece of candy or some potato chips every time you wanted a cigarette, you are likely to end up gaining weight. Same would be true if you were to stop drinking alcohol and substituted junk food for alcohol. So in the case of stress being a trigger, instead of eating a cupcake or having a cigarette or even a drink, he suggests using mindful curiosity as the new behavior. That's your BBO, your bigger, better offer. So when anxiety or stress comes up for you and your instinct is to go to your favorite addiction, try allowing the feeling to just be. Notice the feeling in your body. Where is the anxiety? Like what part of your body? What does it feel like? Use adjectives to describe it. Is there a burning in your stomach? Is there tension in your neck? Is there tightness in your chest? And don't judge it. Just get specific with the adjective and the location. And then let it be. Just notice it and say, that's interesting. And again, the more descriptive, the better. Maybe your stress or tension is in more than one place and maybe with different feelings. Get curious about this too. The key is not to judge the feelings or label them as bad. It's just to let them exist. Brewer goes on to say, curiosity trumps anxiety. It's part of the process of stepping out of your old habit loop and into the present moment. He uses the acronym of RAIN, R-A-I-N, as another technique to stop the negative habit loop. So R stands for recognize, relax. A stands for accept, allow. I stands for investigate, those bodily sensations. And N is to note what is happening moment to moment. Now, if there's a habit you would like to break or an addiction that you would like to conquer, you can try utilizing Dr. Brewer's 3 gears. Here's a quick recap of those 3 gears. Number 1, awareness. Notice the habit. Remember where it started. 2, what can you learn from this? And what do you really need right now? 3, get curious. Where's the feeling? What does it feel like? Be specific. Keep asking questions. And within that, what's the healthy alternative? What's your bigger, better offer? Curiosity may be your bigger, better offer, But maybe there's an alternative too. Like instead of having a cigarette or a cupcake, maybe you can go for a walk around the block. Maybe you can meditate. Maybe you can turn on some calming music, right? What's the BBO? But one of the best BBOs that he talks about in the book is self-compassion and love. He offers this meditation while taking slow, deep breaths. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be free from harm. May you care for yourself with kindness. And then one more time for yourself. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be free from harm. May I care for myself with kindness. So go slowly. Repeat this as many times as you need. And see if you can't find self-compassion and a bigger, better offer for breaking that habit that you would no longer like to be an addiction in your life. All right, friends, that is all I have for you for today. I look forward to talking with you next time. Until then, I wish you more peace and joy in your life. And bye for now. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Overthinker's Guide to Joy. If you're enjoying these episodes, please subscribe or follow this podcast so you can always be in the know when the next episode drops. If you would like to learn more about working with me as a coach, you can connect with me through my website at jackiedecrenis.com. That's JACKIEDECRINIS.com.